Hi, my name is Dan and I'm one of the DT evangelists here at Digital-Tutors. In this video, we're going to look at a question from one of our users, LucasR, on how we can get a clay look to our render. So to illustrate this, I have the character from the Introduction to Character Rigging course. Now, as with many things in Maya, there are numerous ways that we can get any given look. So this technique most certainly won't be the only way, but let's take a look and see how we can utilize some of the features within MonoRay to get a good look very quickly. So to begin with, I'm just going to go ahead and render this out to see what we're working with right now. And as we can see, it's a pretty basic setup. I don't have any lights in this scene right now. So I'm going to save this render so we can come back and compare later on. Now, to begin building the clay material, I'm actually going to come into my Hypershade here, go to Create, and we're going to use a MonoRay architectural material. Now, I usually prefer to use the passes just in case I do decide to use render passes. Okay, so I can set this up. This can be my clay material. Go ahead and double click on that to open up the attribute editor. And to begin, I'm going to just come into the presets button here. And if we left click on that, we can come in. I'm going to use something like the matte finish. Okay, so now that we have that applied, let's go ahead and apply that to the character. So in this particular case, there's two different materials that are applied to the character. So select those and then assign my clay material to the eyes here, and then assign that to the body as well. And as we can see, we have our material applied to this character. So this was before with the blue, and this is after applying our architectural material. Now, clay is one of those materials that can look very different depending on a wide range of variables. And one of the things that's going to give have a great amount of control over the look of our clay is the environment that we put it in. So depending on what look we're going for, the environment may be different, but for the sake of this lesson, I'm just going to go ahead and give this kind of a generic background. So I'm going to come into the render settings here, and if we open up the indirect lighting tab, we'll see under environment, we have the ability to pull in a physical sun and sky. So just click on the create button there. I'll close out of that. And we can see right away we're getting a very different look. So this was before, and this is after adding the physical sun and sky, which actually will turn on final gathering in our scenes. Now, actually, in this particular case, I think it's a little bit bright. So I'm just going to come in real quick to this physical sky node here and bring the multiplier maybe down to about half. Okay, that looks a little better. It's not nearly as blown out as it was before. By bringing the multiplier for the physical sky down. So now we can come into our clay material and begin adjusting some of these attributes. So we could do things like, say, if we wanted to change the color, maybe give it a little bit of a yellowish look. Kind of depends on what sort of color you want your clay to have. So we can see the result of our material here. We're kind of getting that little yellowish hint to our material. So this was before and after. Now we can continue this by adjusting some of these attributes here in the architectural material. So I'm going to come into the roughness and say maybe bring this up pretty high because this roughness here, the higher this value is, the more clay-like our surface will be. Actually, if we hover over it and let the tooltip come up, we can see that Maya is telling us that the higher values are going to give us a more clay-like look. So we can see the result of our material by bringing up the roughness. Looks like I had forgotten to save previous. So real quick, just so we can see the effect that this roughness is having, we're going to set this back to where it was. Okay, so this is the roughness at a value of 0.2, which is the default for the matte finish preset. And then this is by adjusting the roughness up to 0.85 or bringing it up pretty high, so we can see the effect that's having on our material, giving it a little more of that flat clayish powdery type look. So I like that, so I'm going to bring that back to say 0.85. Now, depending on what sort of look we're going for, Our clay may have some sort of a little bit of a highlight to it, so we can add that, maybe bring up the reflectivity just a little bit. Now, by default with the matte finish preset, we're going to notice that the glossiness is going to be set to 0.1. So that's going to give us a very strong highlight. So I usually prefer to bring this down if we want a nice smooth out highlight. We can see how that's affecting our little sample here. And we can see in the resulting render, we're able to get this nice little highlight here. So this was before, and this is after, just kind of increasing the reflectivity as well as the bringing down the glossiness some to kind of blur that out. Now, if we find that we're getting some artifacts in our highlights, we can always bump up the glossy samples. But just keep in mind when you do that, your render time will most likely increase, as is common anytime you bump up sample values. So I'm really happy with the way that this is looking, but one of the really nice features of this architectural material is that it actually has the ability to have built-in ambient occlusion, so we can kind of help to add some deepness to these shadow areas. So if we scroll down in the architectural material, down towards the bottom, we'll find our ambient occlusion. I'm just going to go ahead and turn that on, maybe bump up the samples a little bit. Now, before we see this in our render, we're actually going to have to come into our render settings as well and turn it on in here. So we'll find that under indirect lighting. We'll find our ambient occlusion down here at the bottom. So we just turn that on. We can see in our render how the ambient occlusion is affecting. So especially around this eye area here. So this is with the ambient occlusion, and this was before with ambient occlusion turned off within the architectural material. So it's before and then after. It's just a nice little subtle addition to our renders. Now we can continue to tweak this material in order to really get whatever sort of look we're going for. But that's just a quick look at how we can utilize the physical sun and sky as well as the presets in the architectural material in order to get a good clay look very, very quickly. Now, if you want to learn more in depth some of the features that we can use to get the looks that our projects might require, check out the Introduction to Mental Ray in Maya course.